15 years ago, Amy and I got married. We dated for 3 years after our first date, when Amy was a sophomore in college. My name is Mark Butler Amy, and I met at a party and instantly became a couple inseparable until I graduated. 2 years later, we broke up for Amy's senior year, after which we planned to get married about 6 months after we got married. We were at a party with several other couples our age. It was a barbecue with grilled steaks and lots of drinks. Toward the end of the evening, the crowd dwindled down to us and 3 couples sitting around a fire, drinking and talking. The topic of celebrity hall passes came up. What the hell is a celebrity hall pass? I asked Sadie, the petite blonde to my left, spoke up. A celebrity hall pass is exactly what it sounds like. It's a game we play, where you name the person you want a vacation from your marital vows, for you know the celebrity you're allowed to have sex with, so you guys are just playing this game. Yes and no, Sadie said, patting her husband's leg. Yes, it's a game we're playing, but Tom and I agreed that we'd give each other 1 hall pass. It doesn't have to be with a celebrity. I was shocked. For real. You mean you guys have a standing agreement that you can have sex with someone else anytime you want? Tom looked me straight in the eye and laughed. That's right, buddy. He pointed to the other 2 couples. They had the same agreement. We all agreed the same night, Kathy. You used your hall pass, right? Kathy lowered her head. Tom, you don't need to tell the whole world about this. Yes, I was at a conference and I was working with a nice guy whose wife had just died in a car accident. I called Carl and told him I was going to use my pass to help the guy. Amy was silent, but moved closer to me, holding my hand. Carl, were you okay with Katie having sex with another man? Oh yeah, that's fine with me. She came back to my house someday. I can use my pass too. They continued their game of naming who would be their celebrity. Hall pass. Amy encouraged me to name someone myself, after she announced hers 15 years later. I couldn't remember who each of us picked, but I do remember the hot sex we had when we got home. Amy even admitted that as we made love, she imagined her fantastic lover having her the next morning. I made it very clear to her that I would never agree to a hall pass. Amy agreed that it was just a game. The events of that night were mostly erased from my memory. We went on with our lives. Amy and I quickly started a family and had a boy and a girl. Amy and I kept in touch with Sadie and Tom for a few years, but lost sight of them after they divorced a couple years ago. I ran into Tom at a bar. I just happened to walk in after work and saw him drinking alone. We drank while he told me that not only had he and STI gotten divorced, but 2 other couples from that barbecue had gotten divorced. The main reason for each divorce was a hall pass. Tom said that each of them believed that the hall pass would allow them to experience excitement outside of marriage without having any effect on the marriage. Tom said they couldn't have been more wrong after each used the pass. Comparisons and suspicions arose. Suspicion led to disrespect, which led to divorce. My conversation with Tom confirmed what I thought the night before at that party about the hall pass. It can be a fun game to play as a fantasy. It doesn't work in the real world. I was going to tell Amy about my running with Tom, but because of our busy lives, it never happened. Sitting here now, I wish I hadn't. It was Thursday night when Amy was at a conference in Los Angeles. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Amy calling. It was noisy, like she was at a club. I could tell from her voice that she'd been drinking. You won't believe this, but I met Joshua from my soap. He likes me, and I'm going to use my hall pass. The noise got louder. What did you say? Did you say something about using your hall pass, ass? Yeah, honey, I knew you'd understand. I'll see you Saturday. What the are you talking about? Can you hear me, Amy here? The call ended. I quickly tried to call her back, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I left her several messages asking her not to do anything stupid. I sent her several messages about what the consequences would be if we broke our wedding vows after hearing nothing from Amy all night. I tried several times in the morning, but to no avail. Friday was a horrible day of not knowing what was going on with my wife in Los Angeles. I drove the kids to my parents' house after work. I headed over to Jack's house. Jack's wife, Jenny, made the same trip with my wife. They worked together and were good friends. Jack met me at the door, surprised to see me. Hey, Jack, I need your help. I can't get Amy on the phone. When she called me last night, her voice sounded weird. Can you call Jenny to see if she knows anything? Sure, Mark, I'll call Jenny and tell her you're here looking for Amy. No, don't tell her I'm here. I'm afraid Amy will ask her to cover for me. Just call her and mention Amy in the conversation and let me listen without her knowing. Sure, buddy, they're supposed to be wrapping up class right now. I don't know what made me do it while Jack pulled out his phone. I turned on the recorder on my phone. His wife answered after the first ring. Hi, honey, you must have psychic perception. I just got back to my room after class. We're having dinner tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow. They talked about the conference for a while, then Jack brought up Amy. Have you seen a lot of Amy? Mark called me and left me a message asking if I talked to you about her. Damn it, don't tell him you talked to me. The last time I saw her was last night. We were all drinking when this hot soap star came over to our table. Amy got his autograph, and they danced a few times. We were sitting at our table when Amy said something about her and Mark having a hall pass agreement. The star of the soap quickly jumped up, volunteering to be her past couple. I tried to talk her out of it, but she said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Amy whispered in my ear that she would let a guy sleep with her. Next thing I knew, she was walking arm in arm with a guy walking out of the club. I haven't seen her since God don't tell Mark. Jack ended the conversation by looking at me. Sorry, bro, do you guys have a hall pass arrangement? No, we played a game called Celebrity Hall Pass years ago. But then I explicitly told her I would never agree to such a thing. What are you going to do? I don't know, but it's not going to be good on the way home. I stopped by my parents' house and asked my mom to keep the kids for the weekend. She could see something was wrong, but I didn't tell her what it was. Once home, I tried several more times to call and text Amy, but to no avail. I assumed she had turned her phone off so she wouldn't be disturbed while she slept with her soap star. Amy's flight was supposed to drop her off by mid-afternoon. Amy would drop Jenny off, so I asked Jack to text me when Amy dropped her off. I set up our video camera on a shelf in the living room so I could meet her face to face. I wanted everything she said to be recorded at 4 o'clock. A text came in from Jack. I had about 20 minutes. I grabbed the camera remote and waited for my wife to return. I almost jumped up from my seat when the garage door rattled. Pressing the record button on the remote, I tried to be as calm as possible. Amy popped out of the kitchen with her bag in tow. Oh my God, what a crazy ride, she said excitedly. Yeah, I bet it was. I've been trying to call you. My phone broke. I dropped it and it just shattered last time I talked to you. I couldn't hear you very well. It sounded like you met the star of the show and used your pass. Yeah, we were at the club and Joshua Marrow came to our table. You know, the star on my soap. We danced a few times and talked about our hall pass agreement, damn. He's so hot, he said he wanted me to use my hall pass on him. That's why I called you. He had all the hot actresses and he wanted me. Can you believe it? He took me to his house and, well, you probably don't need the details. No, tell me how he had my wife with his acting buddy that hundreds of other women had. Amy didn't feel like I was mad. Yet, oh yes, he was experienced. He knows how to handle a woman's body. He said he took one of those pills. Damn it, you're going to have to try it. He lasted forever. Hell, he was good. Those stories you hear about these stars being good at sex are true. Amy was just getting dizzy as she told her story. Finally, she noticed the anger on my face. Mark, are you okay? No, I'm not. My wife is standing here in my living room confessing to adultery, and she can't contain her giddiness about having sex with another man. Adultery, what are you talking about, Mark? It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Joshua was my hall pass. I thought you'd be happy that I was able to fulfill a dream. Am I supposed to be happy that you broke our wedding vows? I didn't break our wedding vows. I took the day off to fulfill my fantasy. It was similar to what our friends did. I just used my hall pass. A look of concern appeared on Amy's face. No, Amy, it was just a game, and I made it very clear that it was just a game. I told you I would never break our marriage vows, and I wouldn't tolerate you doing so. If you had a chance to be with a celebrity, I would be all for it. I don't understand why you can't just be happy that I had an experience I will never forget. Don't worry, I'll never forget either. I'm sure the family you forgot about will never forget either. I walked over to Amy, grabbing her hand. I took the wedding ring off her finger. You made love to him without taking the wedding ring off your finger, this symbol of our love and commitment to each other. We didn't make love. We had sex. Yeah, I didn't take it off. I was going to take it off, but Joshua wanted me to keep it on. I'm sure he did. He wanted to make fun of your marriage, so he screwed you, knowing you were a married woman. Amy stood with her hand on her hip. It was her angry pose. I don't know why you're making a big deal out of this. It was only 2 nights. What do I need to take you upstairs to make it up to you? Thanks, but no thanks. Let me ask you, Soap Boy didn't use a condom, did he? Well, no, Amy was angry, but now my question embarrassed her. You let a man have unprotected sex, a man who's had sex with over 100 women, and considering he's a TV star, probably some men too. I wonder what kind of Hollywood disease he gave you. Amy, odd, he probably gave you something else, if you weren't on the pill. You didn't take the pills, did you? No, I didn't need it because you had, oh my God. Amy yelled again. Hey, just think you might be carrying a TV stars, baby. Amy was obviously thinking in her head. No, I got my period last week, so I'm protected for the rest of this week. It's funny how you're just thinking about it now. Mark, you're making too big a deal out of this, too big a deal. So you're saying I shouldn't make a big deal about my wife committing adultery and abandoning her family. Amy stomped her feet. I told you it wasn't adultery. I used my hall pass. I called you and even told you I was using it. There's a problem, Amy. You used something that doesn't exist. I never gave you permission to abandon our marriage and destroy our family. Stop being so dramatic. I really thought you'd be happy for me. I guess I was wrong. I'm done talking about it. Where are the kids? They're at my parents'. I didn't want them here when discussing our divorce. What do you mean by divorce? Are you going to divorce me over this? No, we're not going to divorce as calmly as possible. I just looked into Amy's eyes. You made your choice, now I'm going to make mine. Are you telling me you're going to leave our family over this? It's not a big deal and you're just going to have to deal with it. Amy yelled, finished talking. I quietly went upstairs to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind me. For over an hour, Amy pounded on the door, telling me we needed to talk. Silence was my response, getting up early. I was out of the house before Amy woke up, pulling up to my parents' house. I found my dad awake while the others slept over a cup of coffee. I told my dad the whole story. Dad just listened without saying a word until I was done. When I got to the end, he just looked at me. What a dad can I ask you? What you would do in my situation, son. You have to realize that things used to be different. Seems like this is acceptable now. If your mother did what your wife did, I'd put a bullet in her forehead. But you gotta do what you got to do, Dad. I don't think I can get past this. She knew how I felt about infidelity hell. I thought she felt the same way. What about that prup her mom made a sign? Amy told me that her mom had caught Amy's dad cheating a few times and wanted to protect her daughter. Amy seemed to have completely forgotten about that. My dad laughed. I'm sure you're going to remind her. Oh yes, but not right away. I want to see what she's going to do. She keeps saying it's no big deal and I just need to come to my senses, Dad. I really don't believe she regrets what she did, or that she did anything wrong. It wasn't until after 10 that my phone started blowing up. Amy was calling and texting, wanting to know where I was. When I didn't answer, she called the kid. Julie, our daughter, walked into the kitchen yawning. Daddy, Mom wants to know where you are and why you're not answering her calls. Honey, what did she say to you? Funny, that's exactly what she asked me. She wanted to know what you told us. What's going on with you two? Are you cheating on her? Or is she cheating on you? Damn, she's perceptive. Dad intervened. Oh, Mom cheated on you, didn't she? I think you should ask your mother that question. I didn't want to be accused of setting her up. I knew Julie would be very upset with her mother. Julie, being the stubborn teenager that she is, pulled out her cell phone, putting it on speaker. Dad's. Here, did you cheat on him, Julie? What are you talking about? Whatever he said, it's not true. What did your father tell you? He didn't tell me anything, Mom. I can read it on his face. You cheated on him, didn't you? No, I didn't. And if he tells you I did, it's a lie. Okay, Mom, you look guilty to me. Julie pressed off on her phone. I'm sorry, Dad. I can't believe she did this to you. I assume you're going to divorce her. You've always preached honesty and morality. I don't blame you if she cheated on you. Julie turned around with a grim expression and walked back upstairs. Your kid has a good head on her shoulders. Mature. Beyond her years, Sheck handle it. Just fine, Daddy said. I'm not sure I'm going to be a daddy. I said 30 minutes later. There was a loud knock on the front door. I heard Daddy outside the door say, Amy, I'm sorry, but you are not welcome in our home today, Mr. Butler. I don't know what your son told you, but he made it all up. I didn't do anything, no matter what you say, Amy. You're still not welcome here. Tell him I didn't do anything, and if he says I did, he's in trouble, Amy blurted out. She seemed angry, I said to Dad as he came back into the kitchen. Be careful, son. I saw that look. She's not going to give up easily. That woman is like a cat backed into a corner. She's going to lie and scratch her way out. I hope you can prove what she did. She looks ready for a fight. Amy was silent when the kids and I got home later that afternoon. That night I slept in the guest room again. No one knocked on the door. The kids had left for school, and I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee. I decided it was time to meet Amy face to face. She walked into the kitchen like she didn't care about anything. Did the kids have a good rest? I nodded as she poured herself some coffee honey. Why are you sleeping in the guest room? Are you feeling okay? You know, why I don't want to sleep next to my cheating wife, Mark. What are you talking about? So, I guess you're going to deny having sex with the star of the show while you were out of town last week, Mark. I don't know what you're up to. She turned around and looked me in the eye with an angry look. You're accusing me of something you can't prove, and I'm going to make you pay dearly. You know you can't prove anything. This is it, a declaration of war? No, we can go back to the way things were, but that's up to you. I'm ready to forget all the unfounded accusations. I'm sorry, but I can't forget what you did. I'm going to do it again. I didn't do anything, and more importantly, you can't prove I did anything. You'll regret it if you try to say I did something, let it go, and let's get on with our marriage. I really realized the threat when I heard it. I didn't say anything. I just got up and walked to my car like I was going to work. I drove down the street waiting for Amy to go to her school where she was the vice principal. As soon as she left, I went back inside, taking Amy's words to heart. I went into the house looking for clues. If this was war, I wanted to get as much ammunition as possible. Jenny mentioned that Amy had gotten Soap Boy's autograph. Was she going to deny her affair? I figured something like that would be too big a trop to get rid of. She'd hide it. It took 2 hours of searching, but I finally found it. Amy had an old briefcase in the back of the closet at her side. It was locked, but she always uses the same code for all her briefcases. At the bottom, under some folders, I found a picture. It was a standard Soap Boy publicity photo. The caption was modest to my friend Amy Joshua Merrow. On the back was another caption, "You were great, Joshua." I looked at the photo before putting it back down. The next stop was the lawyer. Before I left, I put a copy of the scan of our prenup, the recording of Amy's friend's phone call, and my recording of Amy's confession on 2 thumb drives. The attorney I visited was well known for her relentless attacks on cheating spouses in the divorce world. Vicky Sampson was known as the "I laid out my story" of what Amy had done when I finished telling her about the situation and how I wanted it to unfold. She just leaned back in her chair and smiled. "I like that you're tough, set a trap, and wind it up when there's no turning back. It will be temporarily inconvenient until we show proof. Everyone will think you're lying or crazy. Let her think she has the upper hand until the very end." Mrs. Sampson shook my hand. "I'll prepare the papers and have her served at the school. You need to do a couple things for me. First, check your credit card bills. We need to find out the club where she hooked up with her soap star Second Access. Her iCloud. I bet there's selfies of her with Joshua on there. She's probably smart enough to take anything compromising off her phone and upload it to a safe place. With any luck, a copy might be on her cloud hurrying home." I quickly sat down at her computer. I didn't even have to try to get into iCloud. Tucked away in her photo folder were the 3 pictures I was looking for, 2 pictures of Amy and Soap Boy, and one with Amy Soap Buoy and her friend, Jenny. I copied the photos onto a flash drive. A quick look through the photos gave me the name of the club that was written on the wall behind them. My lawyer was very pleased with my find. She told me not to tell anyone under any circumstances that we had the pictures. Her plan was to serve Amy at the school on Friday afternoon. This would give me time to take the kids to my parents for the weekend. She also told me that I shouldn't move out of the house regardless of what Amy said or did that Friday. I was just dropping the kids off at my parents' house when my phone rang. I switched it to voicemail and ignored her messages. I hadn't been home 10 minutes when she barged in. I was sitting in the living room and had my video camera on when I heard the garage door rattle. I didn't want to miss any compromising statements. "You son of a... What the... do you think you're doing?" I started to respond, but she cut me off. "You just couldn't let it go, could you? What is it, Mark? Your little male ego is damaged. You humiliated me in front of my staff and you're going to divorce me. I'll do it, but you'll pay. You know, you can't prove the adultery you put into the divorce, and without that, I'm going to take everything you have from you. I hope you're happy you could have just let it go. Did it bother you that I had great sex with a celebrity? You could have just let me have a good time, but no, well, you..." Amy stomped around while I sat there without saying a word. She came back into the living room with fire in her eyes. "When are you moving out?" "I'm not moving out. I'm staying here." "Oh, no, you're not. If you want a divorce, you'll have to move out." She looked at me for a few moments, expecting me to stand up, but I just sat there and smiled. "Okay, when this is all over, you're going to wish you'd just shut your mouth and let us get on with our lives." The next month was very stressful. Amy and I didn't talk. The kids were slow to approach Amy. Julie even wondered if her mother was really cheating. Amy was telling anyone who was willing to listen that I made the whole thing up. Her attorney filed response to our motion asking for sanctions for false statements. She even tried to get the court to kick me out of the house. That was denied. The court expedited our hearing, and both sides were given limited time to testify and question. Witnesses. My attorney questioned both Amy and her friend, Jenny. They both denied that Amy had gone out with the soap star and denied that they had even dated him or gone to a club in preparation for the deposition. My attorney told me that it was imperative that I tell the truth, but offered no additional information. She hoped their attorney wouldn't ask about the evidence we had gathered about Amy's affair, thinking we didn't have any, as Mrs. Sampson predicted. She got it into my head that I had not witnessed any deception on my wife's part, but did not ask about any evidence of her deception. I got the impression that her attorney didn't know that Amy had actually done what I accused her of doing at the actual trial. I'm sure Amy thought everything was going great. I testified about Amy's adult recounting my feelings about adultery and objecting to being allowed in the room. I was cross-examined on the same issues in the testimony. Yes, I did not attend her conference or see her doing anything with other men. Amy testified that she had done nothing and, like me, was against adultery and would never have tolerated the concept of hall pass. Amy's attorney subpoenaed Jenny to testify that the encounter with the soap star never took place. I looked at her husband, Jack, who was in the courtroom. While she testified he lowered his head to avoid my gaze, Jenny started to squirm when my attorney asked her about Jack's call and her words that Amy had left with the soap star, clearly nervous. Now she stuck to the story, claiming it never happened when Jenny sat down. Amy and her lawyer had smug faces. Amy's lawyer stood up and began to argue that they wanted sanctions for our false statements. The judge started reprimanding my attorney for not proving the claims we made with a smile on her face. Mrs. Sampson stood up. "Excuse me, Judge, we have irrefutable evidence." Amy's attorney snapped back. "I object. We have not been notified of the evidence. We have no obligation to disclose the evidence. If their witnesses were telling the truth, there would be no need for rebuttal." The judge smiled and told Mrs. Sampson to continue. Mrs. Sampson called her investigator to testify. "Judge, before we continue, we admit that Mrs. Butler did not have sex with Joshua Morrow." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but Mrs. Sampson looked at me to shut up and wait. The lawyer called her. Investigator who testified that Joshua Morrow had been in Europe that week. Amy's lawyer jumped in with this admission that my client did not commit adultery. "We demand that this far cease and force the court to impose sanctions on Mr. Butler." Mrs. Sampson with a broad smile on her face. "No, we're not saying she didn't commit adultery. We're just saying it wasn't with Joshua Morrow." Jenny was called to the stand. My attorney asked her again if she and Amy had been at the conference and if they had met with who they believed to be Joshua Morrow. She again denied this. Jenny was again asked if she had called her husband and told him that Amy had left with a man who was not her husband. Even after being reminded that she was under oath, Jenny denied that she had called. I turned to look at her husband, who spoke with just one lip. "I'm sorry." My attorney turned on the replay of the recording of Jenny's call. Amy's lawyer jumped in, objecting to the recording. Mrs. Sampson said, "Judge, my client was an invited guest at the witness's home and was allowed to listen to the call." The judge told the lawyer to sit down and ask Jenny if that was really her voice. She had no choice but to admit that it was. I began to feel vindicated when the evidence finally came out that I was telling the truth. Amy was called to the stand. Amy again denied that when she returned home from her trip, she admitted to having sex with another man. She gasped loudly when a video emerged of her describing her having sex with Joshua Morrow. Amy was in tears when selfies and a signed promotional photo were presented as evidence. As Amy was leaving the witness stand, the judge turned to Mrs. Sampson's lawyer. "I'm confused. You said that Mrs. Butler did not have sex with Joshua Morrow, but you just presented evidence that she did." Mrs. Sampson called her investigator. "Judge, we have proven that Mrs. Butler committed adultery, but just not with the person she thought she was with." The investigator brought out the surveillance photos from the club. Several of the photos showed Amy and the man she left the club with pointing to the photos. "This is not Joshua Morrow. This man likes to pick up married women. He's a known con man who has been diagnosed with several STDs." At this point, I just had to look at Amy. The look of shock on her face was priceless. After a short break, the judge returned to his seat. He gave a long speech about honesty and fidelity. The judge ruled that Amy had committed adultery as stated in the prenuptial agreement. He ruled in my favor. Upholding the prenuptial agreement, the judge lectured Amy that even if there had been no prenup, he would have awarded me custody of the children. For the record, he deemed Amy an unfit mother because of her persistent attempts to cheat with tears in her eyes. Amy turned away from the lawyer's desk to leave. Mrs. Butler, stay where you are. We're not done yet. The judge called Jenny to the bench to join Amy. You both raised your right hand and swore to tell the truth in the courtroom. That oath is sacred in this building. He looked directly at Jenny. I don't care if you have some mistaken belief that you helped your friend. A lie is a lie in this courtroom. If this were a criminal case, you'd both be in jail right now. I find that you both gave false testimony, and I hold you both in contempt of court. The judge fined them both the maximum fine of $5,000. Amy's bad day got even worse when she walked out of the courthouse to a local news crew pointing a camera in her face. I later learned that the lawyer had warned them. Mrs. Butler, do you have a comment about abandoning your family for a one-night stand with a fake TV star? The reporter's question was the straw that broke Amy's back. Amy let out a blood-chilling scream and then pounced on the reporter. It was a blur of arms and legs as Amy hit the reporter. Amy had her on the ground and was pulling her hair when the deputy was forced to use a stun gun. The cameraman videotaped the entire episode. Amy was all over the national newscast that night. Unfortunately, Amy didn't get to see her finest moment. She was locked up in the county jail where she spent the next 6 months. No, I didn't have a beautiful blonde lined up to take Amy's place. I was too busy raising 2 kids. Kids being a single parent now, and no, I didn't reunite with Amy when she got out of prison. Though she tried, my mother felt sorry for her and asked her to give her another chance. But I didn't. Amy lost her career and became the target of jokes all over town 3 months after Amy called and texted me. I agreed to meet her at her mom's house. I sat in silence and listened as Amy told me how much she loved me and missed me. She missed being a part of our family as a result of her arrest and conviction for assault. She was only allowed limited supervised visits with her children. Amy said she was sorry she lied about her bond, as she called it, and was so embarrassed that it appeared she had been duped by a con man. She finished by begging me to take her back, saying she would be the best wife ever. I stood up and took a deep breath. Amy, that was a passionate speech. I believe you meant every word of it. You apologized for lying. You said you missed our family. You said you love me. I believe you, I really do. But it's what you didn't say that's most telling. You never said you were sorry or even showed any remorse for breaking our wedding vows. I think you were sorry that you didn't end up sleeping with the guy of your dreams. I don't believe you regret cheating on me, or even that it was cheating. The answer to your question is no. And hell no, I'm not taking you back now or ever. I want you to stop contacting me, period. If you don't, I will renew the restraining order that was issued when you were arrested. Amy stood up crying. I'm sorry, I cheated on you, and yes, I enjoyed it. I'm really sorry I enjoyed it. Is that what you wanted to hear? Amy, we're done. Go live your life. It's not gonna happen with me. I turned and walked out the door, Amy yelling at me and her mom, struggling to hold Amy down. That I'm sitting here looking at my soon-to-be ex-wife Laura and my best friend. We've been married for 25 years. We've been friends with Robert for 23 years. My former best friend became the last as soon as he first started having my wife. Look, Steve, you don't need that gun. Bob said whatever it is, we can discuss it rationally. You have nothing to fear from me. Please take your finger off the trigger. My Glock 45 lay flat on the armrest of my chair, my finger resting on the trigger. I don't think it would be good for my health after all. You're 60 pounds heavier than me and 6 and taller. I've seen pictures at your house with your SEAL buddies. You could snap my neck in about 20 seconds. No thanks, I think we should just sit here until Carol gets here. She dropped your youngest off at softball practice and she'll be here soon. Listen, Steve said, my cheating wife Laura, I don't know what you think is going on. I demand that you stop this right now or I will do what Laura. I swung my gun. If you stand up, I'll shoot you in the kneecap. And if you stand up, Bob, I'll blow your privates off. Why don't we just sit here in silence? And while we're doing that, I bet if you two think hard enough, maybe you can find it in the back of your PEC's brains what this is all about now. Why don't we sit here and play a quiet game? The first one to tell all will stay in one piece and I'll shoot the other one. Those two sat there stunned. I just stared at them as they started sweating and squirming back and forth on the couch. I started thinking back to the best days when Laura and I first met. To hell with that. Who cares about that? What matters now is one little comment from a few months ago that got me thinking. Carol and Bob were at a barbecue on Saturday afternoon. When Laura walked up with a couple of cold beers, she held them out to us and said, "For my husband's." I spit the beer out of my nose when she said that. Bob just grinned. What was that all about? I asked Steve. "I have 3 husbands," bands quickly coming to her senses. She giggled and said, "I have a husband at work, a husband at the DMV, and a husband I really love. That's you, Steve." I laughed and she kissed me, running her tongue down my throat. She'd never done that before. My stomach twisted in a knot. I started paying attention to the two of them, and nothing. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I started checking security systems and records in the cloud. I pulled years of archived records stored in the archive, and nothing could they have done this years before we had security cameras. But she said husbands, as if she meant the present over the next few months. I went through the phone logs and all the emails on her computer and phone from last year. Nothing. I knew they both worked in a government office that had security cameras everywhere. There was nothing they could do to avoid being caught. I checked the credit card receipts I had saved up over the years again. Nothing. It seemed the only time they were together was in the car. They never left early or in separate cars to go to work. They only drove alone when one of them was sick or for family events or vacations. They were always home at the allotted time. The only time they were late getting home at night was when they were stuck in heavy traffic because of an accident. An hour and 15 minutes, give or take, every day. They never traveled to conferences or seminars. I guess my gut was failing me. That was until 6 weeks ago when Bob walked in, and then my oldest son, Eric. They both left at the same time. That's when I noticed that they both had the same build in the back. I went online and ordered home DNA test kits for my children, Eric, Todd, and my youngest, Anne. I asked them not to say anything to their mother. I wanted to surprise her for her birthday. Surprise, happy birthday. "Laura," I called out. Carol tossed 3 plain vanilla envelopes onto the coffee table in front of them. "What are these?" Laura asked Carol, "and I want you two to open them and read them. Then I'll tell you." "Oh, hell, I don't think they require an explanation." I snorted. They slowly reached out and opened each one. Laura went pale at the first sight of them. Robert threw up in the basket by the couch she grabbed. The other 2 read them and cried, "I'm so sorry, Steve. I never meant to do that to you. I thought they were yours. I must have timed it wrong when I was fertile." Robert came to his senses and began to beg. "She promised me that she would be safe. I would never make a cuckold out of my best friend. We weren't the best of friends. I bet you both enjoyed making Carol and I look like fools. I'm not going to shoot you or try to get you fired from your job. We're going to divorce you if I fired you, Laura. I'd have to pay you alimony. I'd keep my pension and you'd keep yours. We'll split everything else in half." I took all our investments and put them in Anne's trust fund for her college. I canceled all joint credit accounts after I paid them off. I took half of the remaining money and put it in a separate bank account. We're putting the house on the market. All the fond memories I had of the place were nothing more than a facade. I've already rented an apartment across town, as far away from you two as possible. I told the kids this morning that I wasn't their father, just a stupid man that you two used. I don't think they're very happy with you. Anne says she's going to move in with me when she graduates in 2 months. She doesn't want to talk to you, Laura. I haven't said one disparaging word about you, so you're going to have to give her time, please. Steve. Laura begged. I love you. I always have, and I always will. I just made a mistake in my cycle. I grinned and shook my head, Laura. I don't think you really believe the nonsense you're trying to slip me. There's an old saying in the Bronx has a sound all its own. I really love you. I want to grow old with our grandchildren and watch them be born, she cried, trying not to shoot her. I replied, Laura, there's one problem here. You and I are not going to have children for you to look at. As it turns out, I'll never have our grandchildren to look at. You'll be able to look at them with Bob, she cried again and said, I'm so sorry. I never meant to do this to you. I looked at Bob and tears were running down his cheeks. He tried to wipe them away before they fell into his lap. Carol came over and started to soothe him. Bob, I talked to all your former SEAL team members and told them how you betrayed your naval code of conduct, not military law, but the code of relations between the Marines themselves. I told them how you screwed your best friend and betrayed him and me for the last 23 years. The email says you are persona non R to them. I'm sure they will call you personally. As far as you and I are concerned, it's over between us. I don't have to do the housework now. I'll get Alam for the rest of my life, or until I get married again. You know what, I'm never getting married again. I'll just bring men into my house and them in the bed you pay for. I've already asked my lawyer to block our financial accounts. We're going to get an allowance until the divorce is finalized. I'm going to take everything we have. I'm sure my lawyer will crucify you both for what you two have done to us. And I'll make sure to play my part in front of the jury as the resentful wife who wasted 23 years of her life on you. The good news is I sent the DNA info to your parents. Bob, they're thrilled to have 3 more grandchildren. But Laura, I can't say the same for Steve's folks. They were absolutely heartbroken that they would never have grandchildren. Laura slid off the couch, crying with despair. I waved my gun at Bob. Help her up. Bob put her back on the couch. He picked her up and sat beside her, holding her so she wouldn't slide back to the floor. A man came into the room and asked, "Are you Mr. Robert Watkins?" "Yes," Bob answered. "You have been served." He turned to Laura. "Mrs. Laura Foster." She only shook her head. He placed the envelope in her lap and took a picture. "You have been served." He turned and walked away. Bob Carroll said, "In this package is a restraining order against you. You have 2 hours to pack your things and get out of the house. I'm not afraid of you per se, but I don't want to deal with you. I'll have it taken down so you can see the kids. I think you can move in with Laura. I want you to go away for the weekend. I'll finish packing and leave Sunday morning and you can come home." I told her, heck, just think about it. You could let Bob move in and you could share everything, not just a ride to work. Laura burst into tears again. "Okay, Bob, we give up." Bob looked confused by that statement. I continued to explain Carol, and I puzzled over how you two got away with it for so long. Well, at least until the day she called you one of her husbands, since it doesn't matter anymore. Tell us how you two have been tooting my horn. "All these years?" Bob sighed and slowly shook his head and said in the car while we were driving back and forth to work. Carol and I looked at each other incredulously. "That's right," he said in the car, "never anywhere else." "When did it start?" "About a year after we started driving together one day. We were stuck in traffic. I was starting to get a tension headache." Laura saw the discomfort I was in, reached out and started rubbing my neck. My headache was slowly dissipating. That's when she offered me intimacy. We were tormented with guilt and swore we'd never do it again. But we did. When did we start having sex? We couldn't do it because of the heavy traffic, so we drove in daylight. Then daylight saving time ended. It was dark, and both directions, if traffic was smooth or started and stopped, we just touched each other with our fingers. If there were accidents, we stopped in traffic. I always made sure that no one from the truck could see us doing it when she got on top of me. That's why our windows were tinted. We didn't need prying eyes. I looked at Laura. Laura, please look at me." She raised her puffy eyes. Laura squealed, "I swear I didn't do it, Steve. I swear it was just sex. I love you with all my heart. I've never said no to you. I always made sure you had everything you could handle at least 4 or 5 times a week, if not more." Bob pleaded with Carol, "You just don't realize how hard it is at work and standing in traffic day after day. Oh, you poor baby." Carol replied, "You needed to de-stress after a hard day at the office and fighting traffic. Do you remember the week I left to take care of my sick sister? You begged me to come home because you were going crazy, and that was only a week later." Laura, what about poor Steve? He cooked dinner and made sure the house was in order, and the kids had their homework done by the time you got home. You know, Steve, maybe we should have had an affair since we were under the pressure of always having to take care of everything by the time they got home. Laura, I thought you were telling the truth about when it must have started. I seem to get it every day in the summertime and in the off-season, except for weekends and holidays. You used to shut me off during the week. What changed now? I remember before my youngest was born, I used to get sex once every 2 weeks. La wrinkled her nose. I took the van he'd drive, and I'd saddle him up. Let me guess, about 9 months before each child was born, there was a major accident. You two were stuck in traffic for 8 hours, I'm guessing you were busy at the time. Both of you lowered your eyes in shame. Carol asked Bob, "You insisted on buying the van. Is that why you wanted it?" I turned to Laura. "You said you loved me and didn't deny me what I paid full price for by marrying you." "It's true, my dear," she replied. "I love you with all my heart. And what about those evenings when you two slept together? You swore you never gave me his cream pies. Is that true?" "Yes, Laura, you're wrong. I said you've turned me down over 1,000 nights in the many years you've spent together in the car." She looked at me shocked as the gears in her head turned, then she burst into tears again. "Well, Bob, I guess now you two will get up and leave. As for me, I never want to see you again." You and Carol have children, so I guess you two still have children to raise. I won't be attending any more family gatherings since you and Carol have children and you and Laura have children together. That will make the party interesting without me." Bob looked at me and said, "Steve, I'm sorry I was the biological sperm donor, but you are their real father somehow. That doesn't make me feel any better. Now you two leave, Laura. You can come back on Sunday. Carol helped me pack an overnight bag for you, and your parents are waiting for you." I was sitting in my chair drinking my Jack and Coke when I felt soft hands rubbing my shoulders. "You have so much tension in your shoulders," she said, leaning over me and whispering in my ear, "I want to take all this pressure off. How about a little revenge sex? I know you like my breasts. You stare at them all the time." Epilogue divorce has gone through. Bob moved in with Laura. It didn't last long. Curiously, they stopped carpooling. I continued to see Carol. My daughter Anne traveled to the state capital. Anne decided that since I had gotten money from Bob as child support, she could now afford to go to a better college one night. Carol and I had dinner at my house. It was the weekend the kids were at Bob's. I got a call from Anne, and as I hung up the phone, I felt like I was about to faint. Carol looked at me with concern and asked, "What's the matter, dear? All the kids, all 7 of them, just took an ancestry test. They want to see how many of them each have the same DNA I have to pack up and run. I figure I have a few weeks before Bob and Laura find out that your and his 4 children are actually mine. He'll hunt me down and tear me into a million pieces." Carol replied, "I'm coming with you." Why he won't hurt you? He's not the kind of man to hit a woman that's easy for you to say, "You're not the one who fed him your cream pies for 23 years."